DXP, digital experience. What's the P again?
Platform.
All right.
How long have you been in this industry?
Hello and welcome to episode 157 of the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but on this weekly podcast, I chat with the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums that I've met on my journey from techie to CMO, sharing their marketing street knowledge in a show that Jason Falls described as a variety show for marketers. Come and say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'll include links to me, my guests, and all the things we talk about in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com. And we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. It's Saturday, the 11th of March. Thank you for joining us. Hope you've had a good week and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. If you listened last week, you'll know that Jeff is on holiday. So in a change to our regular programming, this week is a bit of a content advisory takeover, as not only will I finish the show with a regular visit to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with their chief troublemaker, Robert Rose, I start the show with a really fun chat with my chum, Cathy McKnight, their chief problem solver and lead analyst. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
If you're a regular listener or you're in the content management industry, you'll be very familiar with Cathy McKnight, who's been a regular on the show and has over 20 years of global experience and expertise in content strategy, content operations, customer experience, and related technologies. As the Content Advisory's chief problem solver and lead analyst, Cathy helps organizations transform how they approach content operations and technology and has helped dozens of companies realize their marketing and communication objectives by focusing on bridging leadership, content, business process and technology strategies into practical roadmaps. I started with a simple question about an industry acronym, but as so often happens when I chat with Cathy, it didn't stop there. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome back, Cathy, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm well, Ian. Thanks for having me back.
No, you're very welcome. And for people that, you were last on episode 138. I think you're a 3-time or maybe a 4-time guest, aren't you?
I think this might be our 4th. Yeah.
Yeah, splendid. So you've just...
People are going to start to talk.
If they're not already talking
This is how rumors get started.
If they're not already talking about you, Cathy, then I don't know what's going on in the world. So you were last on the show on episode 138. For those that didn't listen to that, how dare they? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I am a content #all the things expert. So been working in the content realm for all of my career, actually, whether it's been on the writing or the technical. I've coded, I've developed strategy, operations. These days, I hang my hat alongside my colleague, Robert Rose, with the Content Advisory. And we work with organizations around the world, helping them with their content strategy, operations, and generally approach how to get content to be a more strategic function of the organization. And I love doing what I do. The clients that we get to work with it's truly a privilege. Yeah.
No, I love what you do. And also, I've enjoyed you presenting at events that I've run and stuff like that. And it's a pleasure to hang out with you, Cathy. You really know your stuff. And I also don't mind every now and again giving up this podcast to the content advisory, basically, with you and Robert on it. So
yeah, if you ever want to go on holiday, just have Robert and I do your episode for the week.
Yeah, I mean, the listener has definitely heard the words "the content advisory" a few times. So thank you very much for joining me again, Cathy. Now, the reason, I mean, aside from the fact we both enjoy a good old chinwag about the industry anyway, the reason why I want to have you back on is because, and it's one of those acronym things, right? You and I are always chatting about these acronyms, but I'm seeing something new pop up in my feeds, and in the world of what we probably crusty old practitioners used to call content management and content management systems, DXC, digital experience composition, right? So we've heard of DXP, digital experience. What's the P again?
Platform.
All right.
How long have you been in this industry?
I know. There's so many of these bloody TLAs. Sorry, back to this DXC thing. So this digital experience composition thing seems to be riffing on the idea of composable marketing technology and this whole headless thing that we've been hearing a lot about. So as a practitioner out there in the field, doing all the things as you described, I wanted to get your perspective. So shall we start with the composable marketing technology bit, the core of this thing? What's your view on that?
So anybody who's heard me speak on the tech side of things, so as you mentioned, I've spoken on behalf and with vendors, I've done them at open conferences, that kind of thing. And I am, having come from a world where I've worked for the big acronyms, IBM, PwC, I think it's one of those things where we just need to start talking more simply.
Right.
Our industry has been so confusing. We went from CMS to WMS to WMC to WMP. Like, it's just like too many letters, right?
Yeah.
So, from a composition standpoint, I have always been of the mindset that there is no one ring to rule them all. Mm-hmm. No matter how great a platform is, no matter how many parts of a suite or how all-encompassing their solution claims to be, there are always going to be bits and pieces that don't fit that particular vendor. Now, that's not to say, or that particular client, rather. So that's not to say that they shouldn't go all in with these big vendors and maximize the use of the pieces and parts that work for them. But they should always be looking to say what suits us best. And, there's been a few vendors in our industry who over the years, actually one in particular that I won't mention, one of the things I used to love about them was the fact they played so well in the sandbox with others. They could do so many things, but it's like, you want to use our CMS? Great. You want to use our CMS and our commerce solution? Fantastic. You want to just use commerce? I'm okay with that. And it was all about enabling the organization. So, composability, I think, is the foundation of success, regardless of the size of organization.
Yeah. And you touch on a couple of things there, and I'm going to wander a little bit off the script of what I was going to ask you about, because I think what you said there about a particular vendor who's now locking in and saying, we are now, let's imagine they call themselves a DXP. And now if you need to do,
imagine that,
if you need to do anything basically digital, then have we got the solution for you? But do you think, way back in the day, I remember when we were all WCM vendors and WCM was the thing, talking about the acronyms, web content management. And then there was a big push by the analysts and by the vendors to then talk about ECM, enterprise content management. And really that didn't catch light, right? Basically the buyers continued to buy solutions to drive their websites. They didn't buy this ECM thing. Do you think that's, to what you were saying about that particular vendor, do you think they risk losing their buyer because they'll move into this other space and the buyer's going, no, I just want a WCM, so I'm going to go over here because there are about a fucking billion of them, right? So,
there are now with all the micro and the headless and composability. Yeah. So I think they run a bit of a risk when it comes time to reassess as to whether or not the solution still fits.
Yeah.
So you and I have both seen technologies where they've many, they all follow suit, right? They stick with the first acronym, and then another one starts to pick up speed. So then they pivot and they start saying they're that. Some of them go whole hog and like completely lose the bits and pieces. I've got to say that's one thing that OpenText, although, OpenText, huge content management company that nobody knows about. That's one thing they didn't do. They kept the bits and pieces and the terminology. So you could always find yourself where you were to where they are now. So I think that's one thing they actually did well. Again, nobody knows about them, but that's okay. That's a whole other conversation. That could be another episode. Where are they now?
Well, I tell you what. I mean, they had the reputation for where web content management solutions went to die, right? I mean, they were just selecting everybody, weren't they?
Because they'd buy them and then not do anything out of them, right? They'd leveraging the license and anyways. Whole other conversation. So I think, one of the things that organizations need to educate themselves, and I don't say this just because we help organizations select technology, is that's where that neutral third party comes in, because you and I understand the landscape, right? You can do a search for, DXP, DXC, WCM, whatever the acronym, and it will very lovely on your page display you side by each 4 or 5 different technologies. They all have the tick boxes across all of the rows, and you don't know if if you're not in the industry and if you don't understand what they're offering, what the difference is. So, getting back to the whole acronym thing, I think that's one thing we need to step away from and really focus on the requirements. What does your business need? What are the gaps you're trying to fill, or where are you forecasting to be that you need to build the solution to support that?
Yeah, we're often talking about that on this podcast. And I think that's so essential. But also, I think, when you say about having this third party, it isn't all, I mean, you pay me a lovely compliment to say that I know the industry. You know the industry, Cathy. But if we were to, but to have somebody third party come in, it keeps that discipline, doesn't it? Because there's always people on the team who've seen something shiny and they go, I want this. And they're incredibly emotional about wanting it. I want this. It's shiny. And you've got to say, well, what do you actually need? What are the requirements? What do you have already? And all that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of, we've gone to the basics here, haven't we, Cathy? Because that's what some of these acronyms are all about, aren't they? They're the shiny, they're the thing the IT guy is going to get all excited about, and he's going to really want, I need this headless thing. Well, why? Why do you need headless? What's it going to do for the business and stuff? Yes. Okay. So we started with my first question, which was, let's start with composable marketing technology. What's your view? So yes. And then my follow-up to that, and I think you've already answered it, is it something new? I mean, we've always had this debate between monoliths and big vendors and best-of-breed approach, and I think you've already expressed that, right? Nothing has changed in essence, right?
No, it really hasn't. I shouldn't say. So the one thing that has changed are these microservice API-based solutions, where they're coming in and they're acting more as a connective tissue than they are about, they have no, right now, mark my words here, right now they don't have any vision, or it doesn't appear that they're looking long-term to be the one ring to rule them all. Although I've had a couple of conversations with some of them where they talk about their wedge strategy. Oh, we're going to get in and just do this little bit, and then we're going to take over and displace Adobe, right? Yeah, you're really not. But I think
hang on, but I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm quite interested in that point of view.
Okay.
Carry on.
But I think the one thing that has changed is there are vendors on the market now who are truly out there to service a specific function. They're not looking to, and they're all about playing with others. That is the baseline of their success, is being able to integrate with an existing stack. And that they're not going in saying, oh yeah, you need to get rid of this and you need to get rid of that. They're like, we can work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's, so it's a change of culture in terms of the fact that vendors are being a bit more open about this. Whereas what we're saying is it's always been a requirement within a marketing technology stack that it needs to be what the cool kids are now called composable.
Yes.
And so we've always said that they need to integrate together. I think we use those old-fashioned terms like integration.
Yeah, we were talking about composability way before it was hip and cool.
Well, get me on headless and decoupled, my friend. Yes, absolutely. But what did I put a pin in? Oh, the other, yes. Well, I thought that was interesting what you were saying about people, vendors wanting to go in and depose Adobe. agree with you on that. And I think there's also, related to that conversation we were having just now about staying in your lane, is when you talk to vendors and they're like, oh, we're going to go enterprise. And it's like, really? You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole different, and maybe you can, but you're going to have to realize that's a whole different sales cycle. It's a whole different muscle for your business. And yet you're incredibly successful where you are. Where's the shame in looking after mid-market, right? Where's the shame in that, or small organizations? You know, if you can make the commercials work, that's a fine place to be, isn't it?
Well, it is. And you and I have both seen, I can think of two in particular who lost their way because they were determined to move out of the mid-market and play with the big guns, and try and beat out Adobe. I mean, 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, say 8 years ago, that's all we heard.
Yes.
We want to beat Adobe. We want to beat Adobe. We'd ask, companies when we went in to do, as an analyst, I'm talking with vendors all the time. And one of the questions I always ask when we're doing a briefing is, who do you see as your competition? Mm-hmm. And we would have these little, very small, like at the bottom end of the SMB market, mid-market, say, oh, Adobe. Yeah. I'm like, listen, if you and Adobe are in the same room, one of you is in the wrong room. Like that, or the person making the acquisition, the decision has no clue, because you're not comparable, and that's okay. Even Adobe now is approaching the market in a little less sweet approach, right? We've got all these bits and pieces, and come use us as you can. And certainly, SaaS and managed services have leveled the playing ground. So, all of those people who were trying to beat the big ones, the sort of the big 4 or 5 at the enterprise game, those 5 have now very successfully moved into the mid-market because they can. So
and also, I mean, that whole strategy of we want to be Adobe, there is already an Adobe.
Thank you.
Right? Why don't you try and be you? Whatever your differentiation, whatever. If somebody wants to buy Adobe, they'll buy Adobe. They won't buy like Adobe, unless you can offer something significantly different. This is like Adobe, only 50% of the price. Oh, fair enough. Right? But, where's the value? Where's the long-term value in that? The other thing I wanted to say, in the point you made, the pin I put into our conversation about an hour ago,
wondering when we were getting back to that.
is this idea of beachhead. I'm quite attracted to this idea, and the reason why is because we've seen tools like Slack and those kinds of things kind of get walked into our enterprises like almost by accident, and then suddenly the enterprise depends on them, right?
Yes.
And I wonder, with some of these smaller niche players, that they kind of get in with the development community, they build a couple of websites on it, and then suddenly they're in, and the beachhead has been made, right? Yep. And then if they're proven well enough, then various. Do you see that as a strategy for vendors, and do you see that as do you see that with your clients that can happen sometimes? All of a sudden, oh, hang on a minute, we've already got a web content management solution. 17 of the developers are using over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's about making yourself useful. So, you think about any job that you and I do, we get hired to do one thing, but once we get in there, we see what really needs to be done. Technology is very similar. If it's adaptable and amenable to being used in different ways and to be really molded to fit an organization's needs, to fill the gap, that's when it becomes productive. Make it infinitely adoptable. Forget about how it's implemented or how it's, how it gets rolled out. It's about making it so that the users want to use it, that they don't have to retrain every time they go in, that that it's intuitive, that it's actually solving a problem for them. That's one of the things with DXC is all about the connectivity from a workflow perspective, right? It's about connecting all the solutions from ideation to archive for the content creators, and then from, first digit of code to, the final QC release, and making that interactable between the two. That's one of the things. There's always been this great wall between the business and technology. And that's one thing that the DXC has going for it, is that it doesn't, I don't think it removes the wall as some people would like you to believe, but it certainly makes it traversable, right? Like you're able to,
Right.
hop or climb or whatever the analogy you want to use.
Right.
And a line of sight between those two teams can only make things better.
Yeah. So this is about, I'm going to have to try. I should make notes while you're talking, but this DXC kind of strategy, or this composable strategy, isn't about breaking down silos and replacing them with one big silo. It's about connecting the silos, as you're saying, and some of that are workflow and process silos.
Correct.
Right? Is that we want to connect, and you're saying that we can then connect from ideation all the way to publish with these, and that's the way we need to think when we're putting our stacks together, right?
That's exactly it. I've been a big proponent and talked a lot about the permeability of silos. So it's not about throwing open the door and letting a flash flood of people or information or processes through. It's about having that transparency where it makes sense. Now, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different perspective on that, which I totally appreciate. But it's about not making it super secret. And whether it's on the business side within the business teams, whether it's across between the technology and the business teams, even up to the executive level. So, we see organizations, Salesforce is pervasive across, I don't think we've had an organization that we've worked with in the last probably 5 to 8 years that hasn't had some form of Salesforce. It's just, it's out, like it's in there, it's usable, it's accessible. It's, because it was never on-prem, it's easily adopted, whether it's adopted successfully. That's a whole, again, adoption. The next conversation is how do you get technology to be adopted?
Well, but if I can just interrupt you there, that's the way Salesforce grew, right? Way back in the day, is that the sales guys just started using it with a $99 license or whatever, despite the fact that they had one of a massive incumbent already in place, and they did that thing, they did that beachhead, didn't they? Sorry, carry on.
That's okay. So it's about understanding and setting up your governance so that people can see into the different bits and pieces and the data, and whether it's a lake or an ocean or, wherever you're storing it. One of the things we see so often, people are like, how do I communicate all of this? It's like, okay, you have Tableau. Yeah. Set up an executive dashboard, set up a manager's dashboard, set up a tactical dashboard, and then just give access to everybody. What's the soup? I'm not talking about opening up the, HRIS or the FinServ on the business, but when it comes to performance and when it comes to content and audience experience and who's working on what, why is it so super secret? Why does it have to be this shroud over everything?
Oh, we seem to have hit on a little hobby horse for you there, I think.
Sorry.
No, I love it.
I spend a lot of time helping companies with their content operations, and the number of times we get asked, well, why do they need to know that? And my response is always, well, why shouldn't they know it?
Yeah, exactly.
And rarely is there a good reason.
But also I think with this, if we stick with the terminology here of composable marketing technology, it requires a different set of skills, doesn't it? Because as you're saying, it's okay, just slap Tableau over the top of it, right? There's some skills in there, right?
Oh, 100%.
The tool's not going to do it for you, right? And trust me, I've had it go, and I'm not. So I might be a bit ring rusty, but you open that bad boy up and it's like, whoa, right? So there some of this is about. We're straying a little bit off the topic here of DXC, but in order to do these things that the vendors are talking about and the analysts are talking about around things like DXC, you've really got to look at the skills in your marketing team, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. And that's another thing where, from a technology perspective, and one of the challenges, quite frankly, that composability creates is because it's infinitely easier to acquire and implement because there's a path of least resistance, right? A lot of them 30-day free trial. So they'll have, and like full, not limited, like full out kind of thing. Yeah. So you've got, the tech team or even part of the marketing team, maybe content team, trying out unbeknownst to anybody else. 3, 4, maybe 5 different technologies. And then you get these siloed groups going, oh, well, I like this one. Well, I like that one. And because they're geared to one maybe function or another, which again, that's the whole point of composability is to be able to integrate the tools. But, you think about trying to unravel the spaghetti.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And two things there. One is I was going to ask you about from a vendor's perspective is there's that balance for them, isn't it, of product-led growth, where they're trying to tease people enough that you get enough free functionality, but you've actually got to, get deep enough in under the skin of the organization that, oh God, now we've got to pay. And then the other thing is understanding that these things are, they're not free beer, they're free puppies, right? This is the thing that always gets me about when you're talking about, oh, but it's only $99 or something. Think about how much time it's going to take to get that integrated to anything, to get that reporting through Tableau or whatever tool you choose. That's going to be where the cost is, isn't it, in making this work in this new, this composable marketing technology world doesn't happen by itself, does it?
No, and that's the funniest thing is even to this day, because back when we first started in the industry and pretty much everything was on-prem, you'd go through and sure, you can get a insert agents or insert vendor here license for $1 million. How come the bid, the overall bid is 3.5? Yes. Well, because you're looking at a 1.5 to 3x license to implement and operate, and people were gobsmacked. Unless they'd been through it before, they were always surprised. It's like, it's more difficult than others, but composability doesn't take away that factor. It may lessen it a bit, but it doesn't take it away.
This is going in all sorts of wonderful directions, Cathy. This is fascinating. So, and do you think that's gone? Like, I remember those times, absolutely. So even if the software was £250,000 or dollars, right? You knew that 3x was going to be services, so the whole bill was going to be $1 million, right? That's just the way things were. Do you think that's been forgotten with SaaS solutions and these lower price things that people don't realize? Actually, it's going to cost you 3 times more than whatever that is on the monthly thing.
Yes, I do. I think they they hear managed services, they hear SaaS, they hear like they don't need any on-prem stuff. So then, gone are all the servers and this and that and cutover and redundancy and blah, 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 insert all of the buzzwords from the early 2000s. But they don't appreciate the fact that it still takes bodies to maintain, that there's still a service level agreement with your vendor. So you want uptime, you want to make sure that everything is being kept up to date. You want to make sure that, they're going to guarantee you that when they make a change, by the way, which you don't have a say on because it's automatically pushed, that it's not going to muck about with what you already have implemented. It doesn't take away things. It just gives you new things to work on and think about.
Yeah. I was at an email marketing conference recently, and I've never seen a presentation like this before, but it was somebody who was presenting about their email marketing, and they'd had a problem with their vendor, and they were intending to talk about one thing. They did was basically talk about the problems this vendor had created for them for 20 minutes. And honestly, we've been to a lot of conferences. I've never seen anything. And it was in this little closed room, and she wouldn't say the name of the vendor out loud.
Oh, that's good.
It was being recorded. But what had happened was that they changed part of their SaaS service, and they had a connector to I'm saying this under proviso that I'm assuming that what the lady said was correct, right? So if any of this is litigious or anything like that, I don't know. But apparently they changed their Gmail connector. So what happened was the vendor had made a code change, but the customer didn't realize what was happening. And it had sucked all of the email addresses out of their Gmail, including personal email addresses to their husbands and mothers and all sorts of things, put them into their email database, and then started sending them emails, promotional emails, completely breaking any laws of privacy and stuff like that. And they were in so much trouble. And the vendor confirmed when that had happened, and it was a complete mess. So I think there's a cautionary tale there, Cathy, because I only shared that because of what you just said, which is when you have a SaaS solution, you are not in control, unlike on-prem, where you can say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back everything up and be really, really careful, and then I'm going to do the update. An update happens over the weekend, and then suddenly everybody's fucked the next day. I'm swearing too much. I'm sorry. And I did hear that a listener actually listen to this podcast while they're taking their child to school, so I'm going to have to mark this one as explicit. But but you could be genuinely right, and you'd say, well, they're never going to do that because it would screw all of their customers. Well, that's happened sometimes, you know. So I don't know what you're going to do about it, but it's a cautionary tale anyway. Let me get back on with some of the questions I was going to ask you. And we're going way long. I hope that's all right with you, Cathy.
Oh, totally good. I love copy.
Well, the one thing's, if we flip round back to the vendor perspective, right, and we were looking at the category, and we're looking at the DXC category. One of the things that worries me about vendors that align themselves with these tech things. So you have, like you have headless and MACH and all of these terms, and if you go on the homepage of some of these solutions, it says, we are a headless solution, or we're a MACH solution, or whatever it is, right? And in the olden days, you and I used to have it with open source, right? Vendor would say, we're the leading open source vendor. Now, back then, and I still think this today, how is that of value to the buyer, right? So what's your view on this? I mean, do you think this is the direction the vendor should be going? Yes, we're headless, or we're MACH, or composable, or whatever. Or should they be talking about, I think I'm going to know the answer to this?
Yeah, you know what? It's so inside baseball.
Yes.
Like even us talking about DXC versus DXP versus, you know what? We have yet to have a single client ask us about a DXP.
Really?
They need a content.
Wow.
They need a content management system. They need a digital asset management system. They need an email solution. They need a content marketing solution. They are not talking DXP. That is so inside industry.
And look at that.
And DXC is exactly the same way. The whole thing with MACH, listen, I think what MACH has done in the 2 years that they've been in place, like since they started, has really raised an awareness, and it's an opportunity for education. It means nothing. Nothing to customers. It might mean something to the IT team, but I can tell you, marketers.
Well, I tell you what, I think that some of these things are turning into. They're turning a tick box and an RFP, if people do RFPs anymore, which is, and it's just. I'm just kidding. And they hear about that they're hearing about some of these trends, and I think we've always had this, haven't we? Some buyer is putting their RFP together. They hear about something and say, "Are you headless? Or are you MACH, or whatever?" And that then gets taken as being an important thing that a vendor needs to tick the box of, so they get involved with organisation. And and I agree with you. I mean, it's incredible what the MACH Alliance has done in terms of where they went from. I mean, we both know Sonia, who's one of the founders of that, right? And it went from zero to something quite significant in just a couple of years, which is amazing. But that's not to denigrate MACH or headless or any of those things. It's the idea that a vendor will put all of their wood behind that particular arrow. Is that the right analogy? Yeah. And they should talk about what they're doing for the buyer. And I think when you say DXP, I think I'm talking too much for somebody who's doing an interview. But anyway, when you say DXP, how long's that been around for? And yet that isn't resonating with the buyers, what you just said, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been talking DXP for about 6 years now, 5 years, 6 years. And it doesn't, that's not, you know, they may use the terminology, because they're looking at websites of vendors who have those that call themselves that solution, but it's not what they're asking for. You know, and you know, full mea culpa, it may be because of the way we ask the questions. It's like, well, what are the gaps? What do you need to do? Well, we need something to manage our content. We need something that's going to help us publish more efficiently. It's going to help us, you know, we need personalization. But we have yet to have anybody ask us about a DXP using those letters.
Yeah, see, that might be where you're going wrong. So when somebody says to you, we want to manage our content, you should stop saying you need a content management system and say you need a DXP.
Maybe. Except for I don't believe in DXPs. I really don't. I think it's one of the worst terms we could have coined in our industry, because there is no one solution out there, even for as extensive and as amazing as some of them are and what they offer. They cannot do it all.
No.
So it is not. It's not the DXP is the consolidation of everything that lets you go from the ideation through to the delivery of the amazing experience.
Well, also, I mean, we're not. The other thing with a buying cycle, all of the stars have to align that you need to do a scorched earth, on your entire martech stack and say, we need to bring in this monolith that's going to do the DXP in for us, right? And I also think, I mean, the joke I was making there was that your clients are asking you for to better manage their content. And what better solution than that is a content management solution? I would even argue, I used to rankle with things like, why are we splitting CMS into CMS and DAM or CMS and WCM, right? So I'm all this DXP and stuff, I'm not sure about at all. I agree with you. But we were here to talk about DXC. And one of the things I was going to ask you about is the composable strategy. You're definitely seeing clients adopting it, right? Just to finalize on that. I mean, that is something that, and it's always
yes.
Yeah.
And we advocate for it.
Yeah.
So it's about finding the right solution. If there is a bigger solution vendor that can provide and fill gaps, and it works and it's well suited, then by all means go for it. Right? Sort of the fewer people you have to wrangle, probably the better. Yeah. But that being said, we're seeing also less of the typical, 3 to 5 year cycle of rip and replace.
Yeah.
And it's more, what do we have and how do we better use it? Yeah. So companies are looking to make better use of the investments that they've made. That's not to say that they're not replacing things. But often now, especially with composable, it's not that they're replacing the entire thing. Mm-hmm. They're adding something on to make it better.
Yeah. Well, hallelujah to that finally, right? Because the 3 to 5 years.
Really, 20 years in.
But it was crazy, wasn't it? I mean, I'm a CMO, and there was always a reputation that the CMO would come in, say they wanted a new website, which meant ripping out the CMS. That made no sense whatsoever, right? And so we're going to switch platforms. And you spend a year implementing it. You spend a year sort of getting to terms with it and thinking it's okay. You spend a year getting unhappy with it, and you're back again into the market. It's crazy.
Well, and then it's a 3-year life cycle for a CMO, or it used to be. I think it's longer now. So then you start all over again. But we've seen that.
I hear different stories. I think it's shorter. But anyway, so back to the original topic. And what I was going to ask you, actually, it was something we used to ask on the podcast a bit. We used to have a regular sort of chat with Jeff, and I'd say, is something a one-hit wonder or Wonderwall. So this DXC thing, what do you think? Is it a genuine category for these vendors? Is it a one-hit wonder, or is it Wonderwall? And we should all be talking about DXC.
This is a tough one. You know me, I usually have a pretty strong point of view on things. Yeah. I think we're splitting hairs.
Yeah.
I think we should be talking about maybe DXT, digital experience technology.
Wow. Another TLA, man.
Right? Just what we need. 3-letter acronym for those of you who are not up on TLA.
Yeah.
And I think we're splitting hairs.
Right.
Honestly, because I've always been of the mind that a digital experience platform, or whatever you want to call it, is not one thing. It is it's a consolidation. It's a conglomeration of technologies that service the entire organization to deliver those experiences. So whether you want to talk about composability at the minutia level, which is what these guys are talking about, or whether you're talking about composition in a big picture, I think it's great for those who are part of the DXC community. Mm-hmm. I know several vendors, even some of the vendors I work with, were very happy about this. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it's muddying the waters. And I think like DXP, I don't think anybody's going to be knocking on TCA's door saying, I need help selecting a DXC.
There's another TLA, TCA.
TCA.
That's right. And we know some bright folks that are talking about DXC. And so I want to like it because I like some of the folks that are talking about it. And some of the vendors, but I really think that you need to talk about value to the buyer. What's the value to the buyer in this thing? Let's move away from the TLAs a little bit. Try telling any martech vendor that when they put their website together. But anyway, thank you very much, Cathy. We've run way longer than I usually do, and so I hope the listeners really enjoyed our conversation. I certainly did. But when people spin the dial on the interwebs and they want to learn a little bit more about you, maybe work with the TCA TLA, where are they going to find you?
So our website is contentadvisory.net. We have lots of great resources there and information about us. And of course, there's a form you can reach out and connect there. I am on LinkedIn. You can also find me on my own podcast, which is unchartedjourneys.net. I have amazing interviews and conversations with fantastic women. So you can check me out there. And I've got webinars and speaking. If you Google Cathy McKnight, you'll find me.
Well, I'll include all your links in the show notes, especially to your podcast, which I find absolutely delightful. I do feel like I'm intruding somewhat, but I really enjoy the conversations you have. And I'm telling everybody about your podcast. So thank you very much, Cathy. I look forward to having you on the show very soon. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you very much. You too, Ian.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, Cathy. That was fun, diving into all sorts of rabbit holes and riding some of our favourite hobby horses there. I hope you liked it. And I will, of course, include all of Cathy's links in the show notes, and I strongly recommend giving her podcast a listen. And there's no let up on the topic of content or the content advisory this week, as it's time to wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. It is, it's been a long week, it feels like. I don't know. It's, like we're actually having to work for a living, which is, it's very disconcerting, about this whole thing, that people actually expect us to do work.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But no, we have a lovely cocktail to talk through this evening, and it's as basic gets.
Good.
We're calling it. Well, it's not that basic, I suppose. It's. I'm sure you'll have all the ingredients in your desktop bar. This is called a Ranch Rosé. And this is a fun drink. So you may have heard, maybe you haven't, but it's a very popular drink here in the west of the U.S. and in the south. It's called ranch water.
Oh, right.
And
I think you've had
ranch water
on here before, because I remember
we have had ranch water on the show. Yes, we have definitely had ranch water in this bar.
Yes.
And so ranch water, for those of you who may have missed that show or don't know, is a sparkling water, and you get very evangelic people who say it has to be Topo Chico, which is a Mexican ranch water.
Yeah.
And so you have that, and so you Topo Chico, then you basically put that on ice, and then the ranch water is a very small amount of tequila, usually a Blanco tequila. And it's the kind of thing that you drink on a hot summer day, and you can drink just a lot of it because you drink it like water. And basically the fact that you don't have very much tequila in there is really what is great, because you can basically drink it all day, and that's why they call it ranch water. It's ostensibly what the workers would come back and drink when they were done, on their horses and stuff. So we take that idea of the ranch water, and of course we put way more alcohol into it than we would normally put in. But this is a very special version of that. We call it Ranch Rosé because it's made with the same thing. It's a Topo Chico start with ice. So you start there, and then again your favorite Blanco tequila, whatever that is, because we're about to put all sorts of stuff in it, so it doesn't matter if it has a good taste or not. So it's Blanco tequila in that case, and then either your choice of basically doing a blood orange muddle, in other words, muddling some blood orange, or you can do a blood orange syrup. And those blood orange syrup, I find, is not terribly easy to find, and it's got a lot of sugar in it. So I prefer to find just some good blood oranges and crush them up and muddle them and get the juice and pour that in, and it makes a beautiful rosé color. And then you just add a little bit of lime juice just to sort of take off the edge of that. And you are good to go with a very it's a pink drink, I would say, but a rosé color in nature, and we call that the Ranch Rosé.
Well, I shall. That sounds delicious. I shall attempt to make that very drink using only the ingredients of my desktop bar. So I'm going to start with the most English of tequilas, some gin. Oh no, ice! I got to put the ice in first. You said, right? So a bit of gin. Now, I believe that we've agreed that blood oranges are very difficult to find on my desktop bar, but the lovely people at Fever Tree have put the most English of blood oranges into their tonic water, called the cucumber.
Yes, the cucumber. Yes.
So,
I have remembered this. This is a very multi-purpose vegetable that you have there in England.
Yeah, it's also a fruit, I think. Yes.
Is cucumber a fruit or is it a
like
vegetable? I think it's a
tomatoes are
vegetable,
fruits,
right?
aren't they? Is it?
No, it's a fruit. It must be a
It's got
fruit.
seed,
Cucumber must
yeah,
be a fruit.
Yeah, I don't know. But then that would mean that courgettes or zucchinis are also fruits, wouldn't they?
That's right.
I think this is a topic for a different podcast that we need to set up, which is fruits with Robert and Ian.
Nice.
All right, so that's delicious. What are we calling this?
We're calling that the Ranch Rosé.
Oh, I'm not seeing the rosé, but I could definitely drink one of these every week.
I suspect you might.
And where are we going to take these ranch rosés to? Ranch rosés.
Well, I think I have been looking around at different places to go because while we appreciate very much the rain that we've been having here in Southern California, it has made for, quite honestly, a sort of very unique situation where we haven't been able to get outside much. Which is, again, no one's complaining about it, but it has made me long for getting out into some nice weather and maybe along the lake. And what I found myself browsing as sort of a wish list of being where to go, and it feels like this is the right place for us to go, is the Amalfi Coast. I have never been there, and I would love to go there, and it just looks actually spectacular. So I think the Amalfi Coast with a few of these little ranch rosés, and we're good to go.
Yes. I think we might have problems finding that very special Mexican sparkling water, though.
No, we won't find a Mexican restaurant there for sure, but that's okay. Ranch, the tequila and the blood orange is really all about the taste.
So maybe it'd be like a Pellegrino or some sparkling.
Well, there you go. Yeah, a little Pellegrino with a little tequila in it. It's that kind of thing. But here's the funny thing: I don't like tequila in Pellegrino. I've tried that. I've tried tequila in Pellegrino, and I don't care for it.
Oh well, we'd have to find some other kind of sparkling water, or drink some of their fine red wine, or any other lovely libations.
Do gin in Pellegrino, or do you only do it in tonic water?
I do it with mostly with tonic water. And with lime, because I quite like a gimlet, I should say. I quite like a gimlet. So or with or I don't mind sloshing a bit of the other ingredient that makes a martini, whose name has escaped me for some reason. Vermouth. Yes.
Yes. Vermouth, that most vermouth. Rare and obscure of. Yes, indeed.
I think I've been drinking too many of these gin and tonics. I don't think there's any other drinks in the world. But yes. So I like my
according
gin
to your
with...
desktop bar, there aren't,
I like my gin with tonic, I like my gin with lime, and I like my gin with vermouth.
There you go. I like it.
Okay, so we're on the Amalfi Coast, and we're convincing them that we need to drink a special kind of sparkling water with our drinks. And then once we're done with that, conversation turns to marketing. What are we going to be chatting about?
Well, we're going to talk about something that is hot on my mind these days, but it's fascinating that it has lost meaning in so many ways. The integrated marketing and communications. And it's, for guys like you and me, who have grown up in marketing for the last, well, let's be nice to ourselves, 20 years. We have some gray in our hair to show it. Integrated marketing
You've got
communications. Hair. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, very well. that had some meaning, and I find now that it has really lost its meaning in so many ways in so many businesses. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I've had a couple of clients over the last few months where there's this really interesting confusion among the marketing teams. This, and we all know marketing is largely siloed in larger organizations.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that they ask themselves, what should come first? Is it the content that comes first, or is it the campaign that comes first? Mm-hmm. In other words, when you start thinking about defining a campaign, do you build this promotional strategy around content assets to be created, or do you design the promotion and then assemble a bill of content assets that might support that promotion? Mm-hmm. And the classic version of the latter might be a new product launch, right? So you've got a new product launch, and you're going to design this promotional effort that's going to go out to, paid advertising and all these things, a classic marketing campaign. And then you'd go, great, what are the content assets we need to support that? Yeah. And then the former might be what is a little more common these days, which is we have this wonderful piece of content. Maybe it's a thought leadership seminar, or it's a white paper or an ebook or whatever, and we need to design a campaign to actually focus it. Yeah. So in one, the content is the product, and in another, the other product is the product.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing is that so what's happening is the different silos are looking at campaign start dates or the initiation of such at a different level. And I'll give you an example of this. We had one company who basically said, okay, they do their campaign for product marketing and for all their marketing campaigns. They do it like many companies do it at the beginning of their fiscal year, and which is going to be 4 or 5 months before the launch of the campaign. And they plan it all out, and they say, this is what we're going to do, and these are the new products, and this is what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. But then what happens is that they can't communicate that to the people who are going to create the content assets until they start working on it.
Right.
Because they don't actually define it all the way out. What they do is they just say, this is what we're going to do, and we'll figure out what we're going to need when we need it. And so the content people are sort of in the dark. They know this thing is coming, but they don't really know what it is. Yeah. And by the way, it changes 14 times before they actually start it.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they can't just sit there with their, sitting on their hands. So they end up developing all these content pieces like thought leadership and ebooks and stuff like that. And they start putting campaigns around them that then start to conflict with these other campaigns that are going on. Sometimes they're in conflict. Sometimes they're just really weirdly timed. Sometimes they can't do other things because there's, bandwidth and resource constraints. And so the question is, when you see this organization, they go, the people who are putting together these campaigns, they see the high quality, expensive ebooks and white papers as distractions from their product marketing campaigns because they just don't see the return on it because they're not part of it. And then the content team is often rushing through trying to build these assets to support the product marketing campaigns because they're coming in late at the 11th hour and they need, these assets done. And basically, they're not thinking, what can we do that's really cool? They're basically saying, what can we do to meet the deadline? As a result, that content looks kind of crappy in comparison. And so you end up with the thing that's getting the most promotion is the thing that's the poorest and most ill-conceived.
Right, but it's the shiniest.
And so,
and
nobody's. And so what I find is that we have to go all the way back to integrated marketing communications planning, right? So when we start thinking, well, that's what solves that. Well, it's planning IMC. It's a classic going all the way back to understanding what integrated communication starts with. And it starts with content. Now, here's the thing. When we start looking at it, I went out and did this exercise where I Googled up integrated marketing communications. What you get these days, if you do this, and it's fascinating, by the way, Google that, and what you'll see is the definition has come to mean. It doesn't mean this, by the way, but what most people sort of ascribe the definition of integrated marketing communications is aligning your message across multiple channels. In other words, having the same message across multiple channels, which of course it is that too, but that is not the only thing it is. In other words, in my former messy sort of thing that I just outlined, it's easy enough to make sure that your basically all saying the same thing. But if you're saying the same things at different times and different ways and different levels of quality, it doesn't matter that you're saying the same thing. In other words, it doesn't matter if your brand message is consistent if everybody's putting out crappy content. And so the key is to go back to our professor, Don Schultz, the father of integrated marketing communications, who in one of his many books basically said integrated marketing communications is a process. It is the planning, development, execution, and evaluation of coordinated, measurable brand communication programs over time. That's integrated marketing communications. In other words, start with content and get aligned on what the content is going to be, both from the need for campaigns that promote and also from the assets that are going to be needed to support that promotion. Now, we're all on the same page. All campaigns are starting at the same time, same footing, same messaging architecture. So they are aligned in that way. And now when things change at the 11th hour, it's not that there aren't implications, but at least everybody has the implications together. We're all, it's a coordinated mess. And that's the real key is to start there.
So from your perspective, the integration there, and I agree with you, because that is where classically one's mind drifts to because of the new way that we define marketing, is that integrated means integrated across multiple channels. Where you're saying it's more of an integrated across the process and teams and what you're trying to drive, rather than like the distribution.
Well, it's more than just the message, right? It's more than just the message. You know, what you tend to get when you look around for integrated marketing communications and you say to a brand, hey, are you integrating your marketing and communications? Their immediate reaction is yes, because we are aligning our message across multiple channels.
Yeah, exactly.
That's lovely. But if everybody's doing it at different times and out of coordinated step with each other, that doesn't matter. In other words, if the thought leadership team is talking about one thing and the product marketing team is talking about another thing, and you're all competing for the same eyeballs, well, then you're not doing yourselves any good. And it is one voice saying the same thing, but it's one voice saying something at the same time.
And the distribution is just you're distributing your shit more efficiently.
That's right. Exactly.
So you're integrated in. You're now omni-channel rubbish content.
Right.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
Well, that's excellent. And we were chatting just before I hit record about books and the old school way of doing things. Not the old school, I don't mean that, but some of these frameworks have stood the test of time. And this is one of those, isn't it? I mean, when you refer to Don Schultz and stuff.
Totally. This is absolutely one of those frameworks. I mean, you know, Professor Schultz had so many amazing things that he talked about, you know, the frameworks in terms of how to align your integrated marketing communications to create a process, a better process. It's basically creating a better process. And we've lost a lot of that in our, you know, one of the things that has happened over so many years, you know, in the last 20 years, let's call it, since you and I were, you know, either had brown hair or hair, and is the flattening of many marketing organizations where everybody kind of does their own thing. You know, I mean, my little tweetable thing that I get known for is when I say, you know, content is everybody's job and nobody's strategy. And the thing is, the business has come to assume that content is easy, and that it is the promotion and the marketing campaigns that are hard, when it's actually quite the opposite.
Absolutely. I love that. And so when people are searching for well thought out, well planned, integrated content that's written by you, where might they find that?
Well, they won't find any of that stuff written by me. If they want content written by me, I can point you to whether it's inspirational or well tuned or not. I'm not so sure about that. But you can find us on our little website, which is contentadvisory.net.
And this week is a contentadvisory.net takeover, because we just had Cathy on the show. So the listeners heard the words contentadvisory.net a few times today, this morning.
That's right. And we have it, and we're getting much better about keeping it updated.
Yeah, some great posts on it recently, actually, and I must say that. So people should check it out. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs. Where are they going to find you, my friend?
They're going to find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, it is. I have been really enjoying my time on LinkedIn and doing the networking there and all sorts of wonder. It's a great virtual place to go get connected into. And I'm probably coming back to Twitter. I'm probably cave in and come back to Twitter in the next couple of weeks here. So we'll see by the time we meet in the bar next whether I've come back to Twitter.
That's new. That's news because I just heard on This Old Marketing you were contemplating it. Your own podcast that also comes out today. Us recording this. So yeah, that's new news. But for me, I don't care whether you're on Twitter or LinkedIn. Are you going to be in the bar next week?
I indeed will be.
I look forward to it, my friend. I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. A great example of the value of the classics there. Integrated marketing and content. So that's a wrap on episode 157 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Cathy and Robert for sharing their insight, and to you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and driving along with us. Please let us know what you think. You can contact us through our website, rockstarcmo.com. Catch us on the socials. We are Rockstar CMO, or leave a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. We've had a few recently. I really appreciate them. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, as Jeff continues his vacation, I'm planning on a similar format to this week with an extended chat with Teresa Regley, a strategic advisor best known for her work in digital asset management, and I'll wind down the week with Robert Rose in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you can join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.